Okay. If you guys want to give me a second, I'm just looking up a particular game that I want to show. Okay, that one's not bad. Okay. That one is no good. Let me just go back a little bit. Okay, so this one isn't bad. All right, let me get on here for you guys. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I was just talking to Sean Chu about what we might do about doing some opening work, because I believe Roy Yearwood used to do some of that with you, and I haven't sorted out the best way to do that yet. So probably starting with next week, we'll make sure we get some opening work in each lesson. So I'm also trying to figure out, when I look at the stuff I cover out of my lecture games, to make sure that I'm not going over stuff that we've already done. So if you guys see something and you go, hey, wait a minute, we already did that, can you make sure to let me know? Because I need to figure out a method to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, and I'm going to pick something to share just so we can start. Okay, and let's take this right back to the beginning. Let's see how the opening goes here. Now, if you guys also, even later in the lesson today or sometime next week, if you guys have questions about particular openings that you want some advice on, you can always feel free to bring those questions to the lecture as well, and we'll talk about them. I'm just looking here. Give me a minute. Can you guys see this board, first of all? Ricky, yes? See the board? Good. Okay. Let's start this game. I was white in this game. Was I? Yeah, I was white in this game. So you're going to see a same boring opening that I always play as white, but it looks slow, but it always starts to get pieces developed for attacking. So let's just go. E3 looks kind of like a slow move, but I'm slowly starting to point my pieces towards the king side of the board, assuming that black's going to castle there. An important part of this for white is to make sure black doesn't get control of the square on E4. Otherwise, black can fight back in the center of the board. So white's plans will often be based on not allowing black that counterplay. Now, if black plays C4, my bishop would just come back. So if we had C4 here, and then bishop C2, black's pawn structure would become very rigid, and then I would just push back with E4 myself. But I want to get further into the game. Okay, so now black is trying to open the center of the board here, and I don't want to allow that. And that's where this move F4 fits in. Black takes in the middle. I take. Bishop D6 hits my F pawn. And I have to make sure I can get castled here. If I were to play my knight from D2 to F3, like defending my pawn by my bishop, then I would lose control of that important e4 square that I mentioned to you. So instead, I develop my knight to h3, defending the pawn that way. Oh yeah, this one's going to be over quick, but we'll go back and we'll look at it quickly. He accidentally tries to get into this hole here, but forgets that it's not defended. I was thinking this was a better game than this, but now I realize it wasn't. So e5 is a sneaky move, pushes in the middle and hits my queen. I run down and go after the rook in the corner, rook to f8. And now I can take back because my queen is no longer under attack on this square. Bishop e7. So now I'm just playing normal moves. I'm blocking off this f file so there will be no play against my king. Bishop check. Knight h4, queen h4. And of course, because I'm a piece up, the knight that they let go here, I'm happy to trade. So queen g3 to block the check. Queen h5, but suddenly black's queen is completely stuck. And there's nowhere safe for it to go. The only safe square, I suppose, would be queen g4. But then I would just do another trade. I would castle my king, and I'm still a full piece ahead here. So it wasn't the game I was thinking of in terms of being that instructive, but that's okay. We'll go back and stop this share. And we'll look for some higher quality stuff again. Okay. I just want to check what games I brought up in ChessBase before I pick one. Okay, that's fine. Okay, hang on a second, guys. I'm just trying to make sure that I bring up something that you guys are going to be able to see. So let me try this once more. There we go. Give me a second, guys. I'm just trying to work something out here. Okay, can you guys see this screen okay? Ricky, you're always the first guy I see, so you can put a thumbs up if you see it. Thank you. Okay, we are going to look at a game of mine from the Canadian, no, what was this? The Schleinik Memorial in 2013. So that was 8 years ago. Some of you were barely born. Some of you were a few years old. but I don't think any of you were playing chess yet in 2013. Now, we're going to talk about an opening today called the Grenfell Defense because it's one of the counter-attacking openings where you don't challenge the center directly, but you kind of come in from the sides. And I have the black pieces here, so. So knight f6 instead of d5, challenging the center directly. c4, g6. Notice that black hasn't put any pawns up in the middle yet to challenge. Knight c3. And this is the first time that black puts a pawn in the middle to challenge. White plays knight f3, bishop to g7, e3. Now, anywhere here, white could play here, knight here, and take full control of the center, which we mostly understand to be a good idea. But this would be a good example of what a counterattacking opening looks like. After knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, black can play c5 and fight right back against that center. He's going to put the pawn on c5, the bishop on g7, the knight on c6, and try to crack open this structure through here. My opponent, though, played a quieter version. And this queen b3 move is called the Russian system. Okay, so does anyone want to suggest why I played knight c6 here as black? What I have in mind? What am I trying to do next? Don't be afraid to speak up, guys. I need you to participate or it's not all that much fun. So when I play knight c6 on this move, what am I trying to do? Ricky, go ahead. You can unmute.
Maybe I'm trying to attack the queen.
And what else would I attack if I attack the queen?
Also the bishop.
Right. And that c4 bishop, if you want to think about what pieces are powerful and not powerful, I think you guys can see that the bishop on c4 is quite a powerful piece. It's got lots of space. It's in the middle of the board. So I'd be happy to take it if I get a chance, right? Trade my knight for it. So white plays bishop d3. When you guys see this notation that says question mark, exclamation mark, that means they call it dubious, which means not such a hot move. It's not a terrible move, but it's just not a really great move either. So what I try to do now is take advantage of that queen being out on the side of the board, and I play the move a5 to start to try to bother the queen. And a3 question mark. Now, question mark definitely means not a great move. So white is trying to be careful here and not do too much in the position, but the problem is the position is very quickly opening up and it's going to be hard for white to fight back because black, every one of his moves is sort of attacking and getting his pieces up. Both my bishops are well placed. I'm attacking in the center, and most importantly, white's king is still in the center. So e5, d5. Now this is what we're going to call an in-between move. The idea here is where I'd really like to put my knight right now is on a5. But to clear a5, I need an in-between move. So I attack something that's worth more than my knight. I play a4 attacking the queen. And the funny thing is, now the queen has to stay defending this pawn because I'm attacking it once with the knight and once with the queen. So if the queen were to go back to, say, c2, I would play just knight takes d5 and win a pawn. So queen to a2. And now the queen is really awkwardly placed there. And you're going to see later in the game how we take advantage of that and make white suffer for having a queen so far out of play over there. So I continue fighting in the middle. I don't even worry about my knight on c6. This could be called an in-between move too. I create a different attack, but more importantly, I open this bishop's line now down through here. So I'm giving this bishop more power by continuing to attack in the middle while white is not fully developed yet. And I'm just going to show a line here. If white plays knight e4, losing control of d5, I now play knight takes d5. And there's an important, white can play bishop c2 and the game's okay. White is surviving. But I mean, you look at the bishop on c1, it's not very good. The queen's out of play back here. But I want to give you guys an example of what can go wrong. And I'm going to do this one on training. What if white plays the move castles? Is it going to let me do it? I hope so. Let me go forward. Here we go. Castles. Now, if you guys have been studying tactics, however you're doing them on Tactics Trainer or Puzzle Rush or whatever other way you're studying tactics, one of the things that's always worth knowing is that tactics often come about because there's an undefended piece in the position. So if you look at white's various pieces, queen, rooks, bishops, knight, which one of white's pieces is least defended right now? And somebody other than Ricky, if I can get someone to speak up, please. Otherwise, I'm going to call on you. 5, 4, 3,
Queen.
2. Thank you, Luke. And you're the one I was going to call on. How do you like that? So, Luke, you want to unmute and tell me what piece is most vulnerable in white's
The
position?
queen.
Okay, she is protected, but she is vulnerable if she gets attacked by things that are worth more than her, right? But what piece is not protected by any white pieces at all?
The bishop.
Right. So can you see a move that gains time by attacking the queen, but also opens up an attack on that bishop on d3?
Well, I mean, I see something that will attack the bishop and the queen, which is knight to b4. But
okay, so which knight do we move there? Which knight do you think is better? Call it the D knight or the C knight. Which one do you think?
Just gonna guess C.
Okay. The reason the D knight is better is because we also then our queen enters the attack against the bishop as well as the knight. So we temporarily give up a knight for one pawn, but then when we play knight takes pawn again, we're hitting the queen and we're double hitting the bishop. So whatever move queen to here, we're going to be ahead by 6 pawns to 5 now. So can you see how the attack arises out of undefended pieces? So a tactic here comes about because this bishop on d3 is not well defended. Make sense? Everybody good? Okay, so let's go back half a move and we'll go back to notation. I'll only change notation when there's interesting points to be made. So back here, we looked at the line with knight e4, but instead he played bishop e4. So now I take the bishop, knight takes e4. Now, I want to be able to take the pawn on d5. Now my bishop here is very strong. It's wide open. The bishop here, once it gets in the game, is very strong. But what I want to do is I want to make it difficult for the queen to keep defending this pawn. So I'm going to call on Kinjal. Can you unmute for me? Do you see a move that for Black's knight now that's going to make it difficult for White to hold on to that pawn in the center?
Yeah, knight to e7.
So knight e7 is definitely a possibility. And that would be a good try to hold on to that, like to get that center pawn back, because temporarily White is actually ahead one pawn. But we want to keep, so your idea is fine, but what we want to do is we want to keep pressure on White while they're not organized. Their pieces aren't in the right places. They didn't get their king castled. So what we're actually going to play is knight a5, because if we can sink that knight into the b3 square here, hitting the rook, we're going to win this pawn anyways. So that queen is getting more and more pushed out of the game after knight a5. And at this point, even though Black's the pawn down, Black's already better here. So White tries to keep the knight out of b3, but White keeps playing moves that are reacting to Black. So White's not finishing his development, getting himself castled. He keeps reacting to Black's stuff. And every move that Black plays develops more stuff. So now I play bishop f5. And now the idea would be if I can play bishop takes knight, knight takes bishop, I can still sink my knight into b3, and this all becomes very bad for White. Any questions, guys? Does it make sense so far? So when somebody is behind in development, you might even give up a pawn, even if it's temporary, to just go after them and try to push and make things difficult for them so that they're reacting to threats instead of just being allowed to complete their development. So now knight c3 and bishop c2. So I'm still beating up on that b3 square trying to get in there. And this is a funny moment in the game, and I'm just going to go back to training for a minute. My opponent castled here. And I played knight to b3. And my opponent was about to play knight takes knight, and I'm going to call on Max. So if you could unmute, please, Max.
Yeah.
My opponent was about to play knight takes knight. He's an old friend of mine. He was about to play knight takes knight, and he reached down to touch his knight. He didn't quite touch it. And then he looked at me and laughed. What would happen if he played knight takes knight?
Pawn takes and the queen's trapped.
And the queen is trapped. And he gave me a look like, you nasty person. You're supposed to be my friend. So that's a tricky threat, isn't it? And the problem is the rook has nowhere to go. So if he played knight takes knight, it would be not bishop takes, it would be pawn takes. And that poor queen that got pushed all the way into the corner would be completely trapped. Kind of cool, hey? So let's go here. And instead, White plays e4. I think we can go back to notation for a minute to try to hold on to that center pawn. But White is going to lose the rook in the corner for a knight. So even though I'm down one pawn, they've got 7 pawns to 6, but now I win a knight for a rook. And that poor queen that was getting pushed away so far, look at her now. If you go all the way back to, let's see, here, move 6, look how proud she was. And then if you go up to move 18, look how sad she looks. Really something, right? So I still have to win this game though. I'm ahead a knight for a rook, but I'm down 7 pawns to 6. So I still have to make sure that I'm pushing hard to win this game. So what I do is I play f5. And the reason for this move is if you want to think about what if I want to get how do I get my pieces into action? Then one way to do that is say, either I move my rook onto the half open file by playing rook e8, or I decide that I can attack with my rooks by getting more open files and getting rooks and queens in, and I try to break open the position. Any questions on that, guys? That makes sense? So now rook e1. And I take away one of the defenders of e4. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3. Now, even though my bishop on g7 is a beautiful piece, at some point I'm never going to win anything in the center here if I don't get rid of one of the defenders. So because I'm a little ahead on material, I play to trade down, okay? And now I take in the center because again, this d5 pawn is going to become very weak. And I'm going to go back to training because a very interesting tactic is coming up. This is what I would call pretty advanced tactics, guys. My opponent plays queen a2, trying to hold on to the pawn when they should play c4, holding on to the pawn. And there's a very amazing tactic here that has to do with white's pieces not being very well coordinated. Now, if you look, there's going to be squares like f2 that can come under attack. This d5 pawn is still weak. I mean, if you think about it, the reality is in this position, c4 would have been much better because A, it opens up the queen and maybe the bishop too. And then you don't have to use your pieces to try to defend d5. Okay, so back here, we have queen a2. And now I have an amazing tactic based on the fact that white's pieces are not organized that allows me to win the d5 pawn back. And it has to do with interfering with the queen's protection of d5. Does anyone, Brighton, we haven't heard from you today. Why don't you give this one a shot? Ricky, I'll come to you in a minute if Brighton can't come up with this. But Brighton, if you can unmute and try to maybe make a guess how black can go after the d5 pawn and win it. It's not an easy move. It's sort of a hidden thing. So I'm going to give you a chance to try to come up with it.
I mean, in this position, I would probably play bishop b3, but that doesn't look sound.
Okay, why doesn't it look sound, Brighton? Because of knight takes bishop? Right?
Yeah, just many reasons bishop b3 doesn't defend. It also doesn't make sense because knight takes b3, a takes a b3, queen takes b3.
And the pawn is still defended, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to challenge you for a second, though. Bishop b3, knight takes b3. The d5 pawn is temporarily undefended now, correct?
Yes.
And if I play queen takes d5, now that knight has to move away and protect the queen behind it at the same time. Where can it move? So I have my queen on b5, the knight's on b3, it's under attack. But if the knight moves away, I can take the queen on a2. The only square the knight could go to from there that would defend the queen would be c1, but c1's already busily taken up with the bishop. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Can everyone else see it? So there's a lot of hidden tactics in this game, guys. So it turns out that this move is right, but we have to look deeper. We have to realize that after knight takes bishop, we don't take the knight back. We take that d pawn we were after, and suddenly the knight can't move. It's pinned against the queen behind it. It would like to get to c1 to defend the queen, but it can't get there. So pretty cool tactic, yes?
Mhm.
Kind of hidden.
Yep.
Ricky, so you had a question before. Do you want to go ahead?
It's just like I thought of something and raised my hand, but I just got the answer.
Okay, good. We like lots of questions, right? It makes it more fun, so. Anyway, so queen takes d5, kind of a cool tactic. We'll just quickly run it once more just so you guys see. So bishop b3, exclamation point means good move or strong move. Knight takes. And then queen takes d5. So we're going to get our piece back, and we have won that all-important d5 pawn, because without the d5 pawn, all white's left with is broken pawns that are on light squares and a bishop that has trouble getting very active. And if we can do it, this will become a pass pawn that's going to try to become a queen. So I actually don't remember which one of these moves he played. I think it was queen e2, but I'm going to actually go back to notation and make sure. Yep, queen e2. Now, let's suppose he wanted to take on, he wants to counterattack e4. So let's suppose he wanted to do it with the rook. So instead he puts the queen on d2 and tries to trade the queens. I play queen takes b3, he plays rook e4, and I challenge him on the file right away, and suddenly that back rank starts to look like a real problem, because let's just take a, for example, move. Let's say he plays a move like queen d3 trying to protect his rook. Well, after rook takes rook, queen takes rook, we suddenly have queen here, and not only is he losing the bishop, he's also getting checkmated. So we used our lead in development when white was being kind of tentative, trying to protect things, to keep creating threats. So the queen went to e2. I played a takes b3. Now I'm going to use this pass pawn in conjunction with the back rank problems to let white win a pawn, but it's the same problem. The back rank is a problem here. My king is safe, and white's king isn't. So I'll just show you a couple of moves and let you guys try to understand why this is so bad. So far, he stopped my pass pawn, right? But I can simply, he puts his king on f1, so he's not checkmated anymore, trying to keep my rook out of these squares. And all I play is c4. So no matter what he plays, he can't get out, he can't get his pieces into the game now. They're all stuck. I've got a rook and 5 pawns against a bishop and 5 pawns, but his bishop is so bad, it can't come forward into the game, right? If it comes anywhere forward, I just play the move b2 and I queen my pawn. And I'm just going to use these pawns like a battering ram and go right through the middle here and force lines open. And eventually I'll be able to play a move like, once the lines are open, play a move like rook c8 when the lines are open to the bishop, and wherever the bishop moves, I'll have rook c2 next and b2, and then the pawn is going to go through for a queen. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the share for a second. And let's see what else we have up on our magic screen. I don't know why it is when I bring it up this way, I don't see chess base. So let me just go off the screen for a minute. We're going to do one more fairly tough one here. But I'm going to have to, again, figure out how to share the screen. I had this down before, but for some reason it's giving me trouble. Let me see if I've got the right one now. Okay. Give me a second, guys. I'm going to get off this game and I'm going to get on another game. And then hopefully I'll be able to pull that game up for you. This one is pretty complicated, so we're not going to go through every little detail of it. But give me a minute to bring it up into the share. Hopefully I'll get it this time. There we go. And you guys can see a new game now? Yes? Ricky? Yes, see a new game? Okay. So I'm going to go off training here. I don't know why I'm not seeing. Hang on a minute, guys. I got to figure out why I'm not seeing the score sheet here. Still learning some of this stuff. Okay, so view, notation. Ta-da! Wow, we got it. All right. So we're going to take this game quite a ways in. We're going to take it all the way here. I'm going to flip the board because I'm on the black side and we want to look at it from the black side. Okay. So if we count the pawns that are here, Luke, haven't asked you anything yet today. So can you unmute and tell me who's ahead in material in this position?
Let me see. Is white up in material?
By how much?
1 pawn?
Right. 7 pawns to 6, right? So black, which was me in this game, this was the Canadian Seniors Championship in 2014. Black has to try to prove that he's got something to show for the pawn. And one thing that I've got is, let's say if you look at the bishop on b3 here, it looks like a good bishop, but slowly you start to realize it doesn't hit very much. Like it can't kind of, it would have to do something like bishop c4 to get to d3 to get active. But the moment you go bishop c4, we can just play queen takes c2 and attack it. So even though that bishop looks active, it really isn't. So much like the last game we were looking at, the thing black needs to do is start to make things happen really fast. Okay. So we have queen f2. knight f5, just protecting my d pawn so I don't lose any more material. Keep in mind that white can't play g4 because the queen pins that pawn at the moment. Rook e1, and now b5. So I'm looking at what's good in my position. We already said that this bishop here is not very active. And if you look at the bishop on c1, it's the same thing. That bishop's also not very active because we have pawns on dark squares here that keep that bishop from having much room to get into the game. So temporarily, at least, black has better pieces. I can get my bishop on this beautiful b7 square, and my bishop here keeps an eye on, like, keeping the pawns there. So right now my minor pieces are a little better than white's, but because I'm down a pawn, I have to try to react quickly. So knight g3, white sensibly tries to trade off pieces. And of course, I don't want to, because the more pieces that are on the board, the more we can make things happen. So I retreat my queen. Knight f5, g takes f5, queen takes d4. And temporarily, we're down a pawn again. So now it's 7 pawns to 6, but we do have, remember we said that the bishop on b7 would be much better than the one that's on b3. You can see the one that's on b3 isn't doing anything to help attack or defend white's position, but black has this beautiful battery of queen and bishop threatening checkmate now. So queen to f2 to stop the checkmate, and now I have to react fast. Okay, I have to make something happen, because if I do nothing, here's the moves that are going to happen. If I were just to play, I don't know, let's take a normal move. Let's play rook to here. We'll do this as a line. Then all of a sudden, white has the plan to play c3, taking any pressure off here. And I'm just going to play some pretend moves here. And all of a sudden, the bishop gets back, and the next thing that's going to happen is the bishop's going to get here and challenge white's or black's dominance on the white squares here. So it's very important that I act quickly here, or the term we use is, otherwise white is going to be able to consolidate and we'll still be a pawn up. So I'm looking at this square here. I'm attacking it with 2 pieces. It's defended by 1. And what I play is king h8. And I'm going to ask, who haven't I talked to for a while? I think, Ricky, you've been waiting to answer a question. So let's try this one. The only good thing I got going for me is that attack on g2, right?
Yeah.
So why am I playing king h8? What else am I trying to add to the attack? I must have a reason for getting my king over a square. What do you think it is? You want to take a shot at it? We're going after the g2 pawn. That's our target. So we want to add more force to our attack.
To use the h7 pawn?
Yeah, that's one possibility, but then actually my king in that case would be worse on here than here. And okay, Luke, you want to try this one? Go ahead.
Because the rook can move to g8 and then it can help attack on the attack.
Right. Now, here's where the position gets really interesting. This takes time. I have to play king h8. I have to play rook g8, and then I have to get my bishop off of g7, right, Luke? So it's going to take some time, it looks like, right? But I have to make things happen fast. So let's watch what happens. c3, the move that I mentioned. If white gets time, white just plays bishop to d1 and then bishop to f3, and black's attack is stopped cold. So Which pieces are defending white's kingside right now? The queen on f2, obviously. What other pieces are helping white defend the kingside? Anyone want to take a shot? Who haven't I talked to today? How about Max? Did I ask you a question today, Max? Max, go ahead and unmute if you're there, Max.
He said Matt. He said yes.
Okay, I don't usually see the chat, guys. It's better to just unmute and talk to me directly, so. Okay, Max, how
Yeah.
many other pieces are helping white on the king side?
There's only 2 currently.
And if I don't react quickly, there's going to be this bishop d1, bishop f3, and the light squares are no longer a problem for white, right? So I'm going to help you
Yes.
guys think about how we can come up with moves that look amazing. Like, how did you ever find that move? But where you really discover is how you find it is because of a thinking process. White is only 2 moves from playing bishop here and bishop here. So for example, if I play a move like bishop here, so I can get my rook over, then white already has time to go here. I go rook here. And after bishop here, my attack is stopped, right? So now that's why, I don't know if you guys saw anything on training, but if we go back to here, we somehow need to accelerate black's attack by making a move that threatens something and also gives us more time to get to the G file with our rook. So what other bishop moves could we play?
I saw it on notation.
Say that again.
I
You saw the move, so don't tell us if you did, but it's not a move that's easy to find, guys. But once you describe the position to yourself, it becomes easier. Once you realize what the problem is I got to get my rook to G1, but I just don't have time. You could play here, and this is interesting. Let's say you play bishop e5. You get your pawn back. Now it's 6 pawns to 6. And you're ready to bring a rook to the G file right away. The only problem is white can choose to play with 6 pawns to 6 and just continue with their plan to go to D1 and then to F3 with the bishop. So the move bishop takes E5, although it wins a pawn back, doesn't really have a forceful enough threat to it. So if it's not bishop H6, sorry, and it's not bishop E5, Ricky, you want to try this one?
Maybe bishop f6.
Right. Now, if you were trying to analyze, if you were going, I can try this move, I can try that move, and you're trying to analyze and you're looking at each one, this move would never come to mind, right? But if you describe it to yourself in words as a problem, which is, I need to get my rook to the G file, but I need to put my bishop somewhere that really creates a threat, then you finally come up with this move. And what's different? What's the threat here by putting the bishop on F6? What if white continues with their plan of bishop D1? What's the problem now for white? Okay, Ricky or someone else want to take this one? How about Johnny? We haven't talked to Johnny today. Johnny, you want to try this one? If not, I think I saw.
I'm not sure.
Okay, Max, was it? No. Yeah, was it Max? Someone had their hand up here. Oh, Luke. Okay. Luke, you want to tell me what the threat is here for what, or for black?
Because I think the bishop can just go to H4, like
Yeah.
starting to take the queen.
Right. You guys see this? It's a beautiful idea. Bishop to H4 hits the queen and the rook together. You can't block with G3 because the G pawn is pinned down here by the queen and bishop. And if you move your queen away, we just take the rook. And you can't take back because the queen is what we call overloaded. It's protecting G2 from checkmate, but it's also can't take the bishop without losing control. Ricky, go ahead.
I have a question. Can you go
Yep.
back like that? It's just that if you play the black bishop plays h4, can you play f3?
You mean G3?
No, bishop f3. The white when the black plays h4, bishop h4, can
Okay.
white bishop play?
So let's count the material. So after bishop f3, we play bishop takes queen as black. And white plays bishop takes queen. Right now we're hitting the rook on e1. So let's actually take it forward a little bit. So bishop d1, bishop here. And you're talking about this move, right, Ricky?
Yes.
Right. The problem is after this move and this move, for example, all we have to do if we want is just take this bishop back. We might even be able to take the rook because after bishop takes bishop, we just move our rook. But probably the best one is just this move. And we're ahead of bishop, right? It's a good question though, Ricky, but that's the problem. We'll end up ahead of bishop here. So the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is this move, bishop f6, is not a move you'll normally find by analyzing all your different possible moves you could play. It comes from what we call a verbal discussion with yourself about what needs to happen in the position. You're going, I need to get my rook to the G file, but I don't have time. And if I play bishop h6, I'm not threatening anything. And if I play bishop e5, white can just ignore me and continue bishop d1. And after you have that discussion with yourself, you start to look for the unexpected moves, the moves you don't think you can play. And that's when this move comes into play. So let's watch what happens, because the point is, with this bishop not back yet, suddenly white is way behind in development. This bishop is stuck on c1. This rook is stuck on a1. They're just not helping defend the king side at all, right? Juno, go see mom. Go lay down. Go lay down. Sorry, I got to get my dog to quit whining here. Okay. So the only way to stop the threat is to play rook to g1, because now bishop h4 no longer works. Actually, I got to remember, sorry, just this is a long time ago. I want to make sure. I think because I'm thinking he took the bishop first, actually. If rook g1, let's just run through that line. Rook to g8, or even bishop h4 maybe, right? Try to get more pieces away. But rook g8, bishop e3 to try to get the rooks connected. And bishop h4, and it's the same problem. We just keep driving the pieces away. And at some point here, we're going to be able to sacrifice our rook on this square and bring our other rook into the attack. Now the rooks are attacked to each other, so all of black's pieces are working here, right? So we had ef6. Now I finally got my rook to g8. So by giving up my bishop, I got that one extra tempo to get my rook into the attack while white's pieces are not organized very well. Rook to g1. And now I sacrifice my rook, because whatever takes on g2 is going to be pinned. So if he plays, I don't even see it on the notes here. If he plays rook here, right? Then I'm just going to play, now that there's a pin, I'm just going to play rook to here, and there's 3 pieces attacking the G2 square, and white is just lost. Can you guys all see that? Does anyone have a question? And it's because all these pieces are stuck away from the attack. The bishop never got back. The bishop's on its original square. The rook's on its original square. Okay, so we're going to do this fairly quickly. So he can't take with the rook. He has to take with the queen to try to get the queens off the board. And I actually played a poor move here because I didn't understand fully what was going on. I have to be prepared to give up a piece to remain better in this game. I played queen to b6, thinking, okay, I'm pinning the queen to the bishop. I don't care. I'm fine now. But it turns out to be wrong, and I'll show you in a minute why, but I'm just going to quickly show the game. They play bishop to d2 so that they can get their rooks helping each other. Now I play rook to g8. And all they had to do, they had to realize that while this queen is pinned, they need to keep my queen from getting into this square. And if they had played the correct move, which is rook a to f1, keeping my queen out here, then they're going to survive this position. But what they did is they put their rook on the wrong square, and suddenly I was able to play rook takes queen, and queen to f2, and now there's a huge problem. I'm hitting a rook, I'm hitting a bishop, and I'm hitting the other rook. So I want you guys to tell me, first of all, somebody speak up and tell me how much material white has for the queen here. Somebody want to tell me how much material white has? Don't worry about the pawns, but just the pieces. Amelia? Haven't heard from you today. Do you want to try this one? Okay, you can unmute if you want. Okay, yeah, excluding pawns, Evan. How many pieces does white have for black's queen? So if we say if we put these two bishops as being equal and we assume the pawns to be about equal, I have a queen, but white has a rook, another rook, and a bishop, which is actually more than enough material to survive. So had white found the correct move, which right here was to play rook a to f1 to keep my queen out of here, then white actually stands better here. Because after bishop takes queen, rook takes queen, rook takes rook, king takes rook, however we do it, white's going to have a rook and 2 bishops for a queen, which is actually better for white. So what went wrong here? Just when I had everything worked out right here, I had to be brave. I looked at the line and I thought I couldn't play it because I have to play a piece down, but this is amazing and I'll show you guys quickly. After bishop d2, oh, sorry. After, instead of queen b6, if I just play rook g8, forcing the queens to trade, it's queen c6, bishop c6, rook g2, blocking the check, rook takes g2. And even though I'm down a piece, white can't move anything because of this deadly discovered check that comes when the rook moves away. So let's say white plays bishop d3, bishop e3, let's say. Next, I play whatever, I play king here. Or h5, let's play h5, I think that's the best move. I know you guys have to go, but no matter what he plays, for example, bishop here, I can just play rook check and pick up my piece back and I'm still ahead. So I think I have to let you guys go, right? You have a tournament to play. So maybe I'll find a place to post that game too, and you guys can look at it more carefully.